Hi, my name is Sridhar Rangan. I'm the Festival Director of KASHISH Mumbai International Queer Film Festival, which is having its 12th edition right now. So we're in the first weekend of the festival, and this is the beginning of the festival. You must have seen yesterday the opening film, but International Narrative Shorts Competition 1 is the first program on the opening, the second day. So thank you for joining in today, Andrey Volkashin and CARMEN, LOBUE, for joining in, particularly with this Q&A session. And to do the Q&A, we have ABHRA. So Andrey represents the film Snake, and CARMEN represents the film Pink and Blue. So welcome both of you for the Q&A session, and over to you, ABHRA.
Thank you so much, Sridhar. Hello, Andrey. Hello, Carmen. So lovely to see you today at Kashish. Both of your films are so wonderful and deeply moving. First of all, congratulations for making, for telling these stories and for making this these films. And also thank you for choosing Kashish as a platform to showcase your films. Andrey, you're a returning filmmaker. So I want to know first, I would start with you, your film Snake. Can you give us a little bit idea about what was the inception behind this particular idea as to why do you want to tell this particular story?
So thank you so much for your kind words before. This is actually a quite personal film. I ended up, my previous film that went to Kashish as well was, I think, the first queer themed film that I made. And then I realized I had a lot more stories to tell in this theme, and this one came to me really just remembering my childhood, because I grew up in the countryside, and with my cousins we used to play all kinds of games, but then we also had like this game when we would hide in the basement of our grandma and put on the dresses of our aunts and moms and everything we can find in there, and it would get like really extravagant. And at some point, because I come from Macedonia, which is a very patriarchal and conservative country, and our parents were really upset about this. We were never beaten up over this, but it was strictly forbidden, and that made it even more interesting. And then I related this as well to my passion with wildlife and animals, and so pretty amazed how grown-ups would teach kids that certain animals are horrible, starting with snakes and mice and toads and everything in there, not exactly being aware of the importance of them of each species in the environment. So I put the two things, well, as soon as I realized that there was something very similar about how they were telling me not to wear dresses and to fear snakes, it became very, so that was pretty much the inception of the film.
Right. I will come back to you because there's lots to ask about the film. But also, Carmen, at this point, I would like you to tell us a bit more about the story you wanted to tell. Because, of course, your film too, which is named Pink and Blue, the two binaries, you know, which or the stereotypes, I would say, which we usually see. What was your thought process behind telling this story, if you could tell us?
So the film Pink and Blue is about a trans couple of color who, you know, they accidentally get pregnant, and then they decide that they're going to have this baby, but they want to raise their child without the binary. They're both gender non-conforming. So I guess for me, being non-binary, I was sort of like, I love family dramas. So yes, I definitely want to tell that story. But I also, I think what appealed to me was the idea of, you know, a Black and Filipinx. I'm half Filipino as well. So that was kind of a draw for me. I wanted to be able to create a story between two people that I related to. And then also, I felt like we've seen so many stories of hetero couples accidentally getting pregnant, and it's like no big deal. I sort of wanted to see, you know, I wanted to play with the comedy of it a little bit, but I also really wanted it to land in truth and just really just look at this couple who are deciding, how do we do this in a world that isn't necessarily set up for us, we have to kind of build this new world for this child and for ourselves. And I feel like that's something that everyone as a queer person can relate to, because we always have to consider family dynamics and pretty much build our own chosen family. So I was interested in the legacy of this couple and how it might how they might recreate or envision a new legacy for their future generations. So I thought that was a draw for me.
Wonderful. And yes, you mentioned that you identify as non-binary. How much of that personal life experience built into the writing process of your film? And did you also manage, were your actors non-binary as well? Uh, or
Actually, I can't speak on the writing portion. Nike Uche Kadri wrote the short, and both actors are trans. One non-binary, so one trans non-binary and the other trans. Nike Uche Kadri and Jojo Brown are the stars. So I definitely have to ask Nike more specifically, but we had many rewrites and many conversations about the dynamic between these characters. And I know that their lived experiences, as well as my lived experiences, helped shape the world that we were trying to create for these characters.
how wonderful, Carmen. This, we have always, this is a question that keeps repeating, it keeps coming back, that we ask participating filmmakers that, were your actors from the LGBT community, or did you include the people, maybe the writer or the crew, was there any chance to include them? But such wonderful actors, and I'm sure those who have watched the film would be so inspired by them. And the story itself, there are so many beautiful nuances. I especially love the way in the end, the last scene where you have a complete family, where the grandparents actually say that we are there for the baby, which is such a lovely, and on the film ends on such a hopeful note. So thank you so much, Carmen, for taking us through the journey behind the making of this particular film. I'll definitely come back to you now. Again, back to Andre. Andre, you have been a filmmaker. You have been making films. Your films have been to various labs. Also, I saw that you've been to the Torino lab and have received some kind of guidance there as well. This particular film, it's absolutely stunning. The first thing that comes that one would notice is the cinematography. You've chosen a certain aspect ratio. You've chosen the color schemes where you see the bright snakes, and the gay man is, the room of the man would be lighted in a certain color. And then you have these beautiful kids who actually see violence up close, right? Maybe at home, at while they're playing, and then somehow in the end, that violence they're inflicting on the gay man here in the story. And of course, you've used the snake as a beautiful metaphor. If you could just tell us about the style, why you chose that particular style, and also then about the whole, the violence part of it.
I always draw my storyboards, and I do a lot of research before I get into directing. And for me, I guess I have 4 short films after I graduated film directing. So they all look different, but they're all kind of colorful. So I guess I just tend to really appreciate color. And I guess it's also almost a bit of a protest that a lot of filmmakers from Southeast Europe tend to concentrate only like the gray part of our daily lives, because we come from a region that is full of problems and struggles, but it's also a very colorful region, and it's also very beautiful. The landscape is very beautiful. So I really want to make sure that that's also communicated in my films, that I see there is a lot of beauty around me where I live. And the aspect ratio, actually, I was looking at some photos from my childhood, and we had these Polaroid photos that are not exactly square, but almost a full square. And I thought they looked so beautiful because the framing was very intimate, especially when there is like when there is a child inside the frame, and it just immediately felt right for the film. And I wouldn't probably dare to make a feature in that kind of aspect ratio, because I think that probably attention would it would probably damage at some point people's concentration experience of the whole film. But I felt like in 20 minutes it might exactly be just right to try this. So I was slightly worried about it, but then it just felt so right to look at the pictures in that framing that I it. And I'm very glad I did. So regarding the style of the film, that's pretty much it, I guess. I mean, we shot it in southeastern Macedonia, which is in a very nice little swampy lake that's fortunately returning, coming back to life. So it's flooding a little bit of the farmlands, and that's creating even more of a surreal feeling about it. And I'm actually returning there for my feature film to shoot again there, because I guess I'm really drawn to that region. And about the violence, unfortunately, I come from a culture where violence is quite common. Like people still in rural areas, or not even so rural areas, they tend to beat up their children, and it's considered normal, and it's considered okay. And sometimes, and obviously it's not okay, but this is something that it's a tradition that goes back centuries. And now more educated people are learning that there is other ways to communicate with your child and your environment in general. But I think that these things that we are raised with, they're stuck inside your mind, like these cultural aspects that you grow up into. Because as I mentioned, I'm also coming from a small town, and we were never beaten up over this specifically, but like if we did some, grandma would take nettles, and she would just like slap our skin with nettles, and then it really burns. So it's kind of like a soft form of physical punishment, but it like it really says a lot about how people are raising their children here. And that is how children following this example, they end up to responding with violence, especially when grown-ups tend to punish their children, and children have no idea why they're being punished. And I think that's another aspect that now I'm 35 and I'm realizing that I'm still kind of a child inside of me. And in my relationships with people, I need to constantly remind myself about other people's feelings, so that I know I can do the right decision sometimes, or maybe not get mad about something that I shouldn't be mad about. So when I look back into that, I see that when I was a kid, my parents were also children in a way. And that's why when you let that violence be like a correcting to correct, like a tool to correct certain behavior, I think that creates a chain of violence throughout life for these people in general. So that was something very interesting I wanted to explore. And I also think, like, in this culture where we come from, like, because masculinity is so prized,
Yeah.
that you feel like, oh yeah, you need to, like, I felt the pressure in high school to like get into fights, and because I didn't want to get into fights, like I was called names and humiliated in front of other people. So I just really and I'm probably going to return to this in my next projects as well, because I think it has kind of scarred my childhood and early adulthood into seeing myself as a less of a person, just because I don't immediately jump or believe at all in violence. Or so I hope this answers your question. It's obviously a very complex matter, because it is. I am also taking like the courage to speak on behalf of all nation, So,
No,
and
no,
it's not very
absolutely,
flattering, but
Andre.
yeah.
Well, and Andre, what about your actors? Did you cast queer people in your film?
Yeah, it was very important for me that the lead character, who is acting a queer person, that he's openly queer. So
Absolutely, Andre. I totally agree with you, and thank you for being so candid and talk about this, because I'm sure all of us at some point must have gone through, some form of bullying or violence all through the years of growing up, and it's such a universal concept in a way, because again, like you correctly mentioned about masculinity, patriarchy is so deep rooted all across the world, that people who are kind, and the basic kindness, it's often misconstrued as weakness, and people do tend to choose violence to show that they are powerful, which actually it is not. And your film wonderfully explores that, with the whole snake, and the gentleness of the snake, etc. And it's such a misunderstood animal. So really, really, thank you, Andre, for that, and for that explanation. Uh, Now I would ask both of you. So, in this entire process, what was the most challenging part about your film? Was it something to do with the shoot, or was it something to do with maybe funding, or distribution? What do you think is the most challenging for you? Carmen, first maybe you, and then I'll come back to Andre.
I mean, I'll be honest, like I think that the most challenging part was making this during a pandemic. We made it in November. And I think for me personally, I had, the coronavirus with pneumonia. So I had just barely survived. So I wasn't sure that I would be able to physically withstand. That was my first project, like after, while I was still sort of healing. Um, so, that was, I mean, I guess that was the hardest part. Yeah, we didn't get funding at some point, but honestly, like there was so much more good than bad because it was community funded. My friend helped us find, the Filipino parents in the film. Like we had community behind the scenes, and on screen. So I actually felt very held in the process and very supported despite the challenges. So, I, can't complain. We lost a location. So that was fine. We had to rewrite a character. My partner ended up playing the realtor, which was great because then we had a mostly Asian cast. So, there were a lot of things that were they were challenges at first, but I remember being a kid and my papa told me that when challenges arise, you have to accept them. So, challenge, challenge.
Carmen, that's really that's brave of you to say this, and I'm glad that you're doing fine and you're all healed from the virus, and that's a wonderful, hopeful way of seeing at the whole situation. I would come to Andre, but Carmen, could you also tell us what are you expecting out of this film now that after that, after all that you have said, what are you expecting from the people once the film is being shown around?
Honestly, I'm not really sure what to expect because we're virtual. I really wanted to, I was hoping that the world would open and I would be able to come, in person to kind of watch the audience. So that's one of the joys of directing, going in the theater, you've seen the film 1,500 times and you get to watch the people in the audience and see what works and what doesn't work. So I didn't really have that opportunity. So I think what I'm hoping for now is just that people will enjoy it and that maybe we'll get distribution and, so that more people will be able to see it. I really also would love for more of my Asian community to see the film. So that's something that I personally hope for. And I hope that this will lead to, more visibility for trans couples. Particularly trans couples of color. So that's a small hope, but I guess community support is what is most needed.
Right. Thank you, Carmen, for all that, and wish you all the very best. Now, Andre, I would ask you the same question. I'll come back to you about the most challenging part about your film.
It was definitely working with children because I also wanted to work with kids that are from the region and have never been on film before. Part of the reason for that was because I also come from a small town, and for me, filmmaking was such a distant dream that if I had the pleasure of experiencing anything remotely similar to making an actual film in my childhood, I would have maybe decided to invest more into reading and studying film than studying math in school. So I really wanted to provide this opportunity for other children. And we did find a lot of really charismatic, wonderful kids, but they are kids, and it is hard to keep their attention. And I decided to. They didn't read the screenplay, so I wanted them to basically play a game, and they did time. But a game is a game, and then they get out of control, and then you need to. So somebody needs to pee, and somebody's hungry, and somebody's really hot. So it took so much time, and there was this time when like occasionally some of the kids would get upset for whatever reason they understand. But then I would get really upset because I'm not somebody who wants to like torture children. So I would be really worried what is happening with them, and I would obsess whether they're all having a good time and are all parents feeling okay about everything. And so that was really stressful for me because it's very important for me to people to be happy on set on my film, and if they're children, then especially this is especially true then. So that was definitely the most challenging part.
Great, great. I would definitely would want to be part of your crew at some point, because that's such a lovely thing to say, that nobody should be unhappy on the set, which is a very rare thing to hear from a director. But yeah. So now tell me, now that the film is ready, what are your expectations from the
So
audience?
we did. It took us a little bit of time to finish the film. We shot it 1 year and a half before the pandemic started, but then it took us almost an entire year to finish it, and then it took us a while to start getting into festivals. So basically, I have seen the film only once on the big screen, and I'm very happy that it started traveling. And but again, like there was only one time when I've seen the film on a big screen, so I still like can't wait to. And now I'm actually we're having a premiere in a Macedonian town in July, and that's going to happen as a live event. So I will go there and see it again. So I'm really
And
looking forward to that.
right. And how has the reaction been? How what are people saying after watching this?
I
The ones you
I
have got to hear.
I haven't had the opportunity to witness many reactions throughout my region. There was a very not a very unpleasant experience in Bulgaria. The film was shown during Sofia Pride Film Festival, and there is a very strong neo-Nazi movement there that this European country is not doing anything about, and they actually have a very strong propaganda against the whole event and all the films. So they actually somebody read the logline of my film, and they said that it had like subtle hints of pedophilia, which fucking devastating for me to hear. But then Bulgarian newspapers started spreading this news all over, and I was really in a situation when I was shocked to find out that this something which is obviously false, because the film has been awarded to festivals specifically for youth and children. So obviously if they did a little bit of research, they would know that this is a very disgusting accusation of the film. But the community there in Bulgaria is under so much pressure by this neo-Nazi movement, and the country is not doing anything about it, that it really, really scares me what is happening there. And unfortunately, I can see that happening in many other countries in Southeastern Europe. So that was really not good news. But it's important to talk about this because we have to fight this somehow, because it's terrifying. I mean, this is like Europeans like to talk how democratic they are, but obviously we're still dealing with very, very backward mindsets.
Right. Well, but thank you very much, Andre, for highlighting the issues. And once again, Carmen, Andre, thank you so much for bringing out these stories so wonderfully, because both your films end on such a hopeful note. Of course, we are all going through issues, we see those issues, but in the last scene ends on a hopeful note, which is the most amazing part, I would say. And we all could do with some ray of hope, and cinema is doing that. And thanks to Kashish for showcasing these wonderful films, and thank you very much for your time, and all the very best to both of you.
Thank you.
So thanks a lot for this wonderful conversation, ABHRA. You really brought out the intricacies of both the films. And thank you, Andre, for joining. Thank you, Carmen, for joining. It's a pleasure speaking to you. And wish you people best of luck, because your films are in competition. And the award ceremony is on September 5th. So you'll know on September 5th who won the award. There are 15 films in this competition section, and only one winner, hopefully, or maybe two. We don't know what the jury decides. So we have very well-known directors and cinematographer and festival programmers who are part of the jury team. So let's see who they pick. And anybody who's watching this particular video, Q&A video, if you have any questions for Andre or Carmen, please put it in the comment box below, and I'll make sure they see that and respond to your question. There's still 2 more weeks of Kashish still pending, and there are hundreds of films coming up. So if you have not registered yet, please do so. Go to mumbaiqfs.com and make sure you register for 2 weekend passes or a full festival pass. So see you at Kashish, and let's continue the journey and unlock with pride. Thanks a lot.